I spend a lot of time in the media after every school shooting talking about what should have been done, what could have been done, what happened. I was a crime prevention sergeant for a lot of years, and we always talk about how you can't measure prevention, but prevention is the key to school shootings, active shooter situations. And so I thought I'd bring on today a guy who can really talk about not just how to prevent, but how to better respond to school shootings. Lieutenant Jason Polinski, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on here. Appreciate it.
So, you have a wealth of law enforcement experience. And so I always have to ask every guest who's a cop, why'd you become a cop, Lieutenant?
That's kind of a funny story, actually. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I went to college up at the University of Minnesota Duluth, originally majoring in wildlife management. Was not real good at chemistry and biology. Ended up on academic probation because of my grades. Went and asked my counselor, what can I do that doesn't involve math? And he said, what about law enforcement? So I switched my major, went on a ride along, and absolutely fell in love with it.
So I love that. Now, you didn't become a game guy, right? You just became a street cop. Talk about your career.
I started out just a regular old patrol officer. Did that for the first 7 years of my career. Then I got selected to go into the schools as a school resource officer. The high school that I was assigned to had about 2,000 students, so it was a pretty good sized school. And for the next 3 years there, I really loved that job. You got to wear a whole bunch of different hats, got to know the kids really good, and to this day they'll go out of their way to come up and say hi to me. But it was a really fun time in my career to work with the kids and the educators, and that's where kind of my passion for keeping kids safe started.
Well, let me ask you this because post summer of 2020, a lot of school system, including some of the biggest in the nation, like the Los Angeles Unified School District, said that police officers in the schools were a danger to the students, and they actually got them out of the schools. Talk to me about your thoughts on that.
To be candid, if you pull the schools out of the cops are going to respond on a daily basis, and they're missing out the biggest job or role of a police officer in a school is the relationships with the kids and to getting to know kids, developing more of a friendship, big brother type role that they can trust you. And to remove that, not only are you removing the only response to a weapon in your building, but you're also, I think, pushing that gap between kids and cops further apart than it needs to be. To be blunt, stupid idea. Keep the cops in there.
And as we fast forward now to 2024, what we've seen, most of those school districts have put police officers back, because we know that having a police officer in the school is one of the best ways to respond to any kind of violence in the schools. But you bring up a good point, and something that the National Police Association is so supportive of, and that is having cops in the schools as counselor, as role model, as protector. So many different, teacher. I most of our school resource officers on my agency were frequent guest speakers in almost every class except math. And I think that that is one of the most important roles of a school resource officer. I can't tell you how many young police officers I now know who became police officers because of their school resource officer.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a misconception on what an SRO, the role of it is. Um, Being a police officer is probably the last one. I'd say 90% of your time as a school cop is more relationship gauged, counseling gauged, advocate, um, role model, advice giver. Uh, Being, enforcing laws in the school is a very small fraction of what they actually do. They'll do it if need be, but that's not the main point of why they're there.
Now, what do you say to people who say, "Well, I don't want my kid going to school with some guy or gal in a uniform with an AR-15 slung on their chest and all of that"? What's your answer to that?
So so when I got promoted to lieutenant, I was overseeing the school resource officer program, and the first thing I did, at the time they were wearing civilian clothes. The schools didn't even want an exposed gun; they had to wear a fanny pack. Anyway, I changed that. I wanted them in uniform, and I wanted them to drive a mark squad. Number one, because the physical appearance of it onto itself is a deterrent, but also they were I was getting heat from them saying that they're not approachable, and I thought that's not true at all. Because if I walk down the street in uniform during a festival, I get approached 100 times more than if I'm in plain clothes. So I think it's more of a perception based, trying to create a fear that's not there. And I would rather have the kids get used to the uniform and realize that there's a person behind the badge, and they're not just an image.
Well, and I think you made a really good management decision there. We did the same thing in my agency with our DARE officers and our crime prevention officers. We wanted them in full uniform. They had to wear their body armor. And let's face it, that uniform, that tool belt, all of that is a great conversation starter with kids. Kids are
Yes.
curious. They love to ask questions. They love to learn about what's that on your belt, what's that on your belt, you know, and they love to ask all the questions. Now you're still on the job, you're coming up to retirement, but like most of us, you have a bit of a side hustle, and yours is pretty extraordinary. Talk about the company that you're involved in that is trying to take responding to and preventing school shooters to a whole other level.
Sure. So the company's called 3D Response, and we being my partner and I, who was a sergeant in a neighboring city, we worked undercover narcotics together, and um, I was teaching run, hide, fight and police response for active shooters since 2002. And it got to the point where it was more than apparent to me when I was writing my thesis paper on this topic that run, hide, fight and the police response just isn't working. The number of people being killed and injured in these incidents was not going in the right manner. So we decided to basically take the bull by the horn and come up with a way to look at it more holistic and tactically. So we took police concepts. We brought in stakeholders like firefighters and teachers to have this discussion. And in the end, we came up with a system that is multi-layered, much like a fire suppression system, where the fire system is in there to get the fire department there faster, put out or contain the fire, and have a guiding light towards safety for all the people on the inside. We took that concept and we just applied a different threat, and we get the police there faster. We give the tools to the innocent to survive that window. And then we also enhance the police response to get there faster and also have that suspect police officer interaction literally shortened by, on average, 4 minutes. Once that officer steps in that building, they can find that suspect almost instantly. They're Google mapped right to where the suspect is. In the meantime, all the kids have cover, concealment, and communication at their disposal. They have the tools to survive. And I think that's what's missing in our response is we're not looking at this through the right lens. We're looking at this through technology and one-trick ponies. It's got to be multi-layered, comprehensive, holistic. One of the interesting things I found was if you go back to the fire code was written in the 1920s, sat on a desk until 95 children died in a school in Chicago. After that incident, they enforced the fire code. And the fire code's just like our system, multi-layered, blah, blah, blah. Since the fire code's been enacted, I can't find one death to a child in our schools in this nation. So fire really, I hate to give them credit, but fire really did get it right on this one. And I think the blueprint's been there from day one. Um, We just,
The fire department is very good at prevention,
yep.
and you're absolutely right. I was on the job when that last fatal school fire um, in the Chicago area occurred, and then after that, in every single school and in virtually every single new building in this country from the 90s on, um, were installed sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems, and so many things that they don't just suppress a fire that might start, but very often they prevent it from occurring altogether through a multi-layered system. So that's what I love about your concept. And again, you brought in, you didn't just say this is a law enforcement issue, but you brought in the educators who are there every day with the kids. You brought in the fire department, who's really good at prevention. Plus, they're the ones who respond after people are injured. I believe you also brought in a mental health professional as well.
Yeah, we partnered with, her name's Michelle. She owns a clinic. The reason we brought her in was because her clinic only receives court-ordered juveniles that are homicidal, suicidal. Um, so she's been dealing with the kids that have these tendencies to be violent. And again, you want the service to fit the need. And a lot of problems I'm seeing with threat assessment teams is you'll throw a school psychologist on a threat assessment team, and their background is autism and learning disabilities. So they don't have the right minds in those meetings to determine if the person making these threats is in the right setting to get them help.
So your system, it's a multi-response system. Take us through every layer of it, from the time that you might be contacted by a school system who is interested in 3D response.
So the main goal of the whole system is to empower the teachers to take their building back. So if you go look at surveillance cameras, and by the way, surveillance cameras are not safety; they're evidentiary. They don't stop a bullet. But anyway, um, once our system is depressed, so let's say a teacher's in her classroom, she hits her button. That
Talk about the
button,
button. Explain to
okay.
people what that looks like.
So throughout the building, tactically located within the system that fits that building specifically, there'll be buttons placed. So that button, if a teacher depresses that button, it's going to initiate 1,200 pounds of magnetic pressure on the door. It's going to send an alert to 911 that says police needed such and such a school, room 102. And it's going to set off an alert system both inside and outside the school instantly. The reason that that's so important is when I was doing run, hide, fight, or lockdown trainings, uh, it would take a while for one side of the building to know that there's a threat going on versus the other side. So you would have this scattered response with the teachers of locking down or escaping. And you know as well as I do, you could be on floor 2 and on floor 1, a guy could have a Glock firing 15 rounds and you'll never hear it. So it immediately alerts the whole system. From there, the teacher, we put ballistic protection in there, and the ballistics are all hidden there. You can't see it. One of the big things that the educators brought up to us when we first created this was they didn't want the schools to lose the feeling of a school. So we don't lose that learning environment feeling. It's just completely hidden. So you got 1,200 pounds of pressure on the door. The windows are enhanced. There's a ballistic feature that we protect the threshold. Kids have probably a level 7 protected area that if shooting through the walls or the doors, they're not going to get struck. At the same time, there's a command center that's set up in the building where the communication piece comes in. That room is typically in an administrative office, and they'll go into that room and they'll start to dispatch the entire staff where the intruder is. When the first officer arrives, they're going to dispatch the officer exactly where the student is that is the threat. For if this occurred in your neighboring city and you never step foot in that school and not know the layout, it doesn't matter. You're just going to be walked right to them. We have a proactive device called a suspect identification system. If you go to the Nashville shooting or Sandy Hook, when they're trying to force their way through the front door, they can depress a button that will emit a bright yellow dye. It's kind of like the bank robbery scenario where you're marking the suspect, but then you're also providing cover for the person who's running the visitor management so they can get to safety. And then if the police arrive, you know, you're looking for a bright yellow banana. But there's a lot of things that go on simultaneously, and we physically walk the school from that tactical lens to design our system and make it as safe as possible, with the whole goal of giving the teachers the power to take their school back. Within 30 seconds in our system, you can take your entire building back. The hallways would be a ghost town. Um, I can say with confidence, the way Uvalde went down, there's not one child dead if our system was in that building.
And I'm imagining that this is not cheap, but when post every school shooting that you and I have ever seen in our careers, first of all, kids' lives are absolutely worth it. And secondly, from working in the schools, as do I, there's a lot of wasted tax dollars in our education system, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, and you got to put it in perspective too. To me, it's a priority. When you have education leaders that aren't prioritizing the safety of their kids above sporting facilities or a pool, their priorities are wrong. And if they went out, so it was interesting. We did a proof of concept drill a few years back, and we had a retired judge from California there who just handled civil litigation. And she went through the few drills we did, and she made a comment. She said, "What's going to be interesting once you guys get installed, can they answer yes to they did everything they could to prevent loss of life or injury?" And that's the threshold for civil liability. If you cannot answer yes that you did everything you could, Uvalde's up in the billions of dollars in lawsuits right now. So if you're a school leader, to answer yes to that, all you have to do is go out to the citizens and ask them, do you want safety in your school? Go out and get a referendum or a levy. If the citizens say no, then you as that leader did everything you could. But I find that the priorities are sporting facilities over safety. I think I just saw a pool get approved, $24 million for a swimming pool. And our system is installed in 16 schools, and it was substantially less than that. I mean, you're looking at probably 18 million for 16 schools. It's less than a fire suppression system. It's less than your swimming pool. So you got to put that number in perspective on what are you spending the money on, and what's more important, and let the parents and the community decide what's more important.
Well, and when you talk about priorities, this is something we talk about a lot. You and I, when we were young patrol cops, we couldn't go to traffic court without going through a metal detector. And the people that had the tickets, they had to go through a metal detector. They had to go through. There's always some sort of system. Can't go to your city council meeting in most decent sized towns without going through security, without going through a metal detector, things like that. We protect our courts, we protect our politicians, we protect those people so much better than we protect our children. And I like what you talked about, that your system doesn't make the school look like a prison. I know that's always a big factor for educators. It's a big factor for parents, and it's a factor psychologically for kids, right? No kid wants to feel like they're going to prison to go to school.
Yeah, the other thing too that our system does is it, excuse me, it takes away the need to train with the kids. So that was when I was doing this stuff back in the probably 2007-ish era. Um, we would do drills with the kids involved, and there's been reports come out of the anxiety that causes children. And looking back, it wasn't a great idea. So with our system now, all they're seeing is a button being pushed, and maybe they pull out a ballistic feature out of the wall, but it's very, very easy. Our whole motto is keep it simple, stupid. I think a lot of responses, people lose the thought of the physiological aspect to stress with teachers and children. I was in a shooting back in the late 90s, and I experienced the tunnel vision and time slowdown, and my body was, was not normal for that brief period of time. Well, now imagine yourself being a teacher and you're instructed to barricade your door. I've seen teachers that couldn't even get their keys in the lock to lock their door. In fact, I met a guy. This is kind of an ironic story, but one of the schools we're installed in, they did a drill with our system, and there was a substitute teacher in there that didn't know our system was there. So a neighboring teacher told him what the system was. Well, I get an email from the teacher that talked to this guy and said, "You need to talk to the substitute." So I call him. His name's Ron, and Ron was shot twice by Nicholas Cruz in Parkland. His classroom was 2 doors down from where Nicholas Cruz entered the hallway. Ron couldn't get his door locked. So Ron put 2 hands on the door handle and 1 foot on the door frame and was literally in a tug of war with Nicholas Cruz. And he told himself, "You're not taking my kids." And then he said the pulling stopped, and a round came through the door, hit him in the ear, and another round came through the door and hit him in the hip. He will only teach. He called his kids back in and told his kids that you guys have no idea how lucky you are that this district went this far to keep you guys safe. And he will only teach in a school that has our system. He refuses to teach anywhere else because he says your schools are the only ones that are ready to respond.
Wow, that is extraordinary. Tell us where people can find you. Where can they find the system and learn more about it?
Probably our website, 3dresponse.com. I'm also on X under 3D Responses.
Go to the website, and I'm telling you, follow him on X too, because he's doing a lot of great stuff on X. Lieutenant, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And if you would like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.